Good morning and welcome to Motivational Mornings, the podcast that gets you going before you get going.
Good morning and welcome to Motivational Mornings. My name is Ryan, and as always, I'm here today with my co-host Vivi, and today we're going to discuss the book Anything You Want by Derek Sivers. Now, Derek created a website called CD Baby, and CD Baby is a website that sold CDs or still sells CDs of various independent artists. So Derek sold the company, is no longer the owner of CD Baby, but this book essentially is about his journey of creating this website from scratch and his experience of building this business from creation up to its eventual sale. So the first point that I want to talk about that Derek mentions in his book is that you don't know what people want until you start doing it. And I think this is a really important point. You really want to, before you go all in, I think it's important you test what you're doing. And the example he gives is at the start, his website was extremely bare. And the biggest feature of his website was he had a buy now button. But with this, what we sometimes call a minimum viable product, with this bare website, he's able to use it to get enough information to see if people would like his business idea. And with this bare website, he's able to gain the interest of other musicians to help validate this idea. Because he had musicians coming up to him and say, hey, this is an awesome idea. I want to be a part. I want to pay you. Add me to this website. And now this type of testing was so much better than him spending, say, tons of money to create this super fancy website to later find out that no one was actually interested. And now a similar point that Derek made is you want to start now. Now, his example is, imagine if you want to create an international chain of modern schools with, let's say, hundreds of staff and expensive technology. But what if instead of waiting for that, saving up enough money to do all that, you start teaching someone this week? You find one person who will pay you to learn something. If you do this, you'll be able to learn more about your business now, and then you can grow from there. You will always have to start sometime, so why not start now?
And kind of piggybacking off that point there, Ryan, in terms of just starting now to get you going in the business, one of the other points that Derek talks about is if it's not a hell yeah, then it's a no. He talks about how sometimes when you're starting a business, people tend to get over-conceited about the details of how things should be, and they get caught in this planning stage, the procrastination of planning, if you want to call it. But he says that a business plan should take no longer than 3 to 4 hours to make. It should just be easy enough to scratch the surface of the numbers to see if the idea of the business will work. And then you know it's a feasible business. But if you're doing something and it's not a hell yeah, then it's a lot easier to get caught in the details of planning the business so you can compete with people that have already done something like you have. You have to think a lot more about the minutia of this competition already exists, how do I get a unique market advantage, blah, 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 blah. But if you really just focus on if it's a hell yeah for you to do, then that solves a lot of the chitter chatter about that situation. Another thing that Derek kind of really makes a big distinguishing factor through his experience is that there's a huge difference between being self-employed and being a business owner. He talks about this a lot because he goes through the process of the book. He says being self-employed means that if you step away from your business crumbles. While being a business owner means that if you step away from your business for 1 year and you come back, the business should actually be doing better than than when you left. Meaning that's the distinguishing factor now. So people always talk about, I'm a business owner, entrepreneur, I do my own thing, but really how are they on that spectrum of between being self-employed and then also in a business owner? It's a big transition there, and you have to figure out the steps along the way. Another kind of sub point that I really found interesting about Derek is that he talks about how businesses grow, and when businesses grow, who you should be listening to and not listening to in terms of the trajectory of where you want to be. He talks about when businesses grow, Don't listen to the people who are reaching out to you like leeches trying to sell you their services because they notice that you're growing. He talks about sometimes he talks about it maybe incorrectly how lawyers and accountants and people in those kind of situations can be that. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I think I agree with the mind state of him talking about, okay, like I need to focus on my service, my product, and the people that I serve as a market, and don't let all the exterior things come in and kind of disturb what I have to do as a business owner. Because it's really easy once things get going to get caught up in, I have to talk to this lawyer here, or marketing here, or department here, or make sure my accountants or taxes are done. But in the reality, if you're focusing on that customer and the revenue creation overall, at the end of the day, if you have that coming in, you won't really have to worry too much about how the details work out at the end of the day. And going back to what I initially said about just having a good business idea and then making sure it's viable, another point that kind of relates to that is when Derek talks about the quote that nothing survives a first run with a customer. That means that you may have an idea of how things are going to go, or the thought process of how you want the customer acquisition process and the relationship process to go, or how you make revenue, but don't be stuck in the way that you thought it should work, but be malleable to what the input you're receiving and change the service, maybe a little bit or maybe a lot, to cater to what your customer, client, patient is expecting. Another point that I find Derek brought up that was quite interesting was the fact that when he talks about a couple of business philosophical things. Now, just for those of you who haven't actually read the book, Derek wasn't an entrepreneur in his past. Like, he wasn't a businessman. He was a musician, and he was a good one. He survived. He wasn't starving, but, he wasn't super, super famous. And so he comes from an artistic background. And because of that, obviously there's things that, he has missed and he's messed up in his past. But on the flip side, he's also brings an artistic view to how to maybe look at customer experience, which I really find interesting. Now, relating to that, he talks about a philosophy he might have. And it's about that if you're in the business of trying to solve or maybe sell a cure for a problem, then he argues that you're actually not in the longevity of the business. You're just in it to get that one output, the cure, and then you're kind of out. He relates this as if you're in the business to cure something, then you should be okay with that business dying or being dead or bankrupt or whatever, or shut down, once the cure has infiltrated and taken over where the problem used to be. Meaning, okay, you want to get something done, or a vaccine is done, and then the vaccine's distributed. You shouldn't really keep milking the same cow for more milk when you felt like this problem has been solved. You should be able to stop and kind of move on, which I think a lot of people don't do when it comes to certain points of their business. I found that rather interesting. Another thing that maybe wasn't super, super inspirational, but it was comforting, was that he talks about most people in the world don't need a huge vision to make something very viable from a business perspective. Rather, you just need to really focus on the people who you serve, and to do that extremely well. He argues that too many people are worrying about the new Uber, the new Facebook, the new LinkedIn, all these billion-dollar unicorns, about all these fancy new innovations and technology, rather than just focusing on, okay, I have a certain demographic of people that I want to serve. I need to figure out how to serve them the best way possible. Then in result of me focusing on that, nobody else is doing that too much, so I will have a market advantage, which is a really, really interesting way of thinking about competition and market viability, I thought.
Another point Derek makes in this book is the idea of when you're delegating, you have to trust them, but you also want to verify their work. So an example he uses is he hired an employee of CD Baby who I believe was in charge of shipping. And so Derek trained him. He supervised him for a few weeks. And then after that, he left the employee on his own because he's doing a great job. Fast forward a few months, and it turns out the employee had actually stopped shipping out the CDs. and customers weren't getting what they ordered. So now this really tarnished the company's reputation. So it wasn't a quick fix. Derek had to, one, fire the employee, and then he had to move back to Portland himself for 6 months to do the job himself and figure out a system that wouldn't let it get it out of hand in the future. So something that could have perhaps been prevented instead created a problem that took a really long time to fix. And so when it comes to delegation, one saying that I've always heard that I think kind of encompasses this is, when delegating, you want to delegate the task, but you don't want to delegate the responsibility. Another great point Derek had was he discusses the idea of how do you grade yourself. So what does this mean? Well, we all grade ourselves by different measures. It's all unique. Some examples can be, for some people, it's how much money they make. When their net worth is going up, they know they're doing well. For other people, maybe it's how much money they give to others. For others, maybe it's how many people's lives can they influence for the better. Or for others, maybe it's not how many, but how deeply they can influence a few people's lives. For Derek, his grade, his measure for success was how many useful things he could create. And I think it's really a great reminder to take the time to reflect on what things matter to you specifically, and how do you measure your own success. Keeping this in mind will help you make decisions that align with your own values, which, sometimes can be a difficult thing to do if we're not often reflecting or conscious of what are the things that really matter to us. That wraps up today's episode of Motivational Mornings. If you want to check out this book or any other book on Audible, you can go to audibletrial.com/motivational mornings for a free 30-day trial of Audible. And you can choose any book, including this one, Anything You Want by Derek Sivers. Thanks for listening, and have a great day.